Warning.
Warning!
Now for a word of caution.
Broadcasting straight from the All Hazards Prepper Command Center. Welcome to the All Hazards Prepper Show, where we discuss everything from natural disasters to human-made fiascos, technological failures, and those SHTF scenarios, with a hint of discussion on emergency management. Our mission, to keep you aware, prepared, and alive. We've got top-notch experts giving you the information you need to be ready for any hazard you may face. So you're not just prepper smart, but also survival ready. Now, buckle up for another thrilling episode and welcome the All Hazards Prepper himself, Blake. The All Hazards Prepper is a part of the All Hazards Emergency Management Group, where we prioritize emergency preparedness at the household and family level. That's why we created the Household Emergency Operations Plan, or HEOP. This comprehensive all-hazard emergency plan is specifically designed to prepare your home for various disasters and emergencies. The HEOP is designed for families, couples, and individuals, ensuring that every member of your household, including pets, is taken into account. It goes beyond standard family emergency plans, providing you with a robust strategy to be well prepared when a disaster strikes. The HEOP is available for just $3.99. Yes, you heard that right. $3.99. A small investment to help ensure your family is ready for when an emergency or disaster occurs. Don't have time to fill out the HEOP or need a plan that's specifically tailored to your family's needs? Reach out to us. We'll collaborate with you to create a solution that fits your requirements. Visit our website at payhip.com/allhazardsEMgroup. From there, get your HEOP and explore our other emergency preparedness solutions today. Now, enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the All Hazards Prepper Show. Today we have AC on from the Stakeholder Prepper Podcast. Very well-known podcast. They got some great information out there, him and his buddy Chris. Very seasoned preppers. And I'll let AC kind of go into his story and his background. Today we're just going to do our normal kind of podcast interview with AC, what we do with all the other preppers, and then kind of talk about some scenarios, maybe talk it out, and kind of do a little bit of tabletop discussion on some scenarios that we've kind of talked about over the last few weeks. As you know, season 3 from last or a couple of weeks episode ago is all about talking kind of about threats and terrorism and things that are going on, international or internal and external threats. So we're definitely going to dive into that today. So AC, so glad to have you guys on today. Kind of just tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your background and what brings you to prepping.
Sure. No, hey, thanks for having me, Blake. And this is awesome. And I got to give you a shout out too, because I really like the format where you're bringing on people from all over the place, all over the community, and other prepping podcasts, which is really cool because like a rising tide, it lifts all ships, right? And so I like what you're doing where you're bringing other people on and getting other points of view out there. And that's just really cool. So yeah, I co-host the Stakeholder Prepping Podcast with my buddy Chris. And so I feel kind of like I'm missing my other half here. Like, you know, I'm Master without Blaster, or Batman without Robin, or Guns without Whiskey or something. But we do a podcast. You know, we've been doing this about as long as you. And stakeholder prepping, you know, the word stakeholder, that's actually from an emergency management term, which you probably are familiar with. That came from Chris because he also has an emergency management background like you. And, you know, our jam is we're really trying to deliver sort of the timeless, actionable intelligence every week. And that requires a ton of research. We're not talking about current events. We're not talking about politics or religion or really anything in the geopolitical sphere. We're really focused on the timeless info that you can come back to time and again to get you through like the large Teotihuacan event all the way down to your own personal apocalypse, like how to keep your car running right and things like that. So we cover topics from all over the preparedness spectrum, like what to expect from government response in certain catastrophes, all the way down to the best preparedness items under $1, and even things that are just, I guess, really overlooked. Like we did an entire episode on sanitation and like how to not die from dysentery or something else out of the Oregon Trail video game. And that's something that I personally come back to a lot in the prepper conversation. Most people, I guess, who self-identify as preppers like us, they tell you always need those same 5 items, right? It's food, water, shelter, fire, weapons, or some variation of those. But there's a 6th one, and it is sanitation, because in a whole lot of the grid down SHTF scenarios, your poop is going to kill you before you ever get to rattle off any 5.56 out of that sweet, AR custom build. So that's kind of how we roll. It's not a Doomcast or anything like that. And Chris is a Army veteran. He's got former sniper team, experience in Iraq, and he has a couple emergency management degrees, so he's familiar with that side of the equation like you are. And then for me, I've got a completely different background. I have an aviation background. I went to college to learn aviation science and fly airplanes. I am a pilot. I've got a handful of ratings and endorsements. I have an airplane that I keep hangared not far from my home, so that's kind of the ultimate bug out vehicle. And in my day job, I work for a government defense contractor where I do some business development and some like sensor system design, along with training for police, military, and a lot of partner nations. So I kind of help those agencies and partner nations find money from federal government programs like grants and FMS, which is foreign military sales programs. And I really focus on getting different sensor technology out there. I talk a lot about radars and EOIR systems, which is electro-optical infrared. I'm sort of a subject matter expert in EOIR systems, and I do a lot with border and perimeter security stuff, and I've spent a lot of time as an expert in the sensor technology in the maritime environment. So yeah, I'm a SME for EOIR systems, some Seaburn stuff, which I've heard you talk about on your show, which is really cool. And I travel all over the planet in friendly and non-friendly places alike, and so I really enjoy kind of pushing the limits of airport security. Like we did a whole episode on EDC through TSA. So what are the things you can actually take through TSA that you may not know about? And in my home life, I live on what I like to call the homestead and hot storage. Like I have chickens, I have bees, I have alternative power, and I grow as much of my food as practical. But I do have the ability to kind of flip the switch and go completely off a grid if and when I need to. And I really like the solar and battery technology. And so I hope you and I kind of talk about some grid down stuff, because those are the things that I really like to talk about. I have a very expensive, very crazy battery backup system at my home. Yeah, like I said, in the event of of a grid down scenario where I need to, I flip a switch and I am 100% off grid. And I live in a community with some like-minded people. So if the big one ever hits, I do feel pretty good about my ability to be self-sufficient, and I've got a very good support system. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. Is I'm kind of a homesteader prepper in my free time, and I work as a defense contractor doing some kind of spooky stuff here and there in my day job.
Sounds great. Sounds very interesting. Definitely some great things that we'll get into today. Chris definitely has some unique backgrounds, unique education that we'll get into, and definitely very interested in hearing about the homestead and about
Sure.
what you got set up there. Chris has a camera on. His background's pretty good. I like his background there. So
Yeah, I've got so
I'm trying to get there, like me and Chris were talking about before. I'm in an apartment right now, and hopefully in about a couple months, I'll have a background very similar to that.
yeah. So this is, if you see here, this is like like this is the AC homestead where it's,
Yeah.
and you can see my background. There's a lot of I've got a good collection of firearms in my little man cave here, and some firearm wall art and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, always good things to have good conversation pieces around. So,
For sure.
so perfect. Kind of starting us off, and this really kind of kicks off the question and talking about the scenarios we'll kind
Sure.
of run through. But as a prepper in 2025, what is that disaster, that situation that really keeps you up at night and is what you were preparing for?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll tell you, like the AC homestead here is I live out in the forest, kind of the foothills of the Pacific Northwest, and I would say my big one really is forest fire. I think I feel very prepared for a whole lot of things that could happen. I realize that there's a huge preparedness spectrum of stuff that can happen, but in my world, it's the forest fires. And I know you're a pro in that kind of stuff, so maybe you can give me some pointers. But, I'm doing a lot of the clearing of the green spaces. I am on a well. So, like I've said, having the battery backup, and I do have a generator fallback just to keep the water running, that's super imperative to me. And I read recently that out of those recent forest fires or wildfires in California, that so many of the homes that were saved simply because they had the ability to keep a sprinkler going on the roof. And that's just crazy to me because, and you probably know this, but those flying embers, they land on the asphalt shingle, and that really is the kiss of death, so having that ability to keep the water running is a big one for me. But forest fires, I think, are my big one, and I'm constantly trying to keep the green spaces cleared and keep that keep the area cleared between the home and the buildings and the rest of the property. I have a lot of Doug fir trees on my property, and you probably know this, but Doug fir trees, especially young Doug fir trees, they're basically explosive, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We just talked a couple of weeks ago with a forestry, a wildfire science expert. He goes by Woodsy Will
I
on
listened to that
on
episode.
there.
That was
Yeah,
that was a great episode. Yeah,
yes,
that was awesome.
yeah. I mean, wow, this is something. Wildfires is a hot topic right now. No pun intended, but it is really something that a lot of people don't think about if you don't live in an area that's prone to them. But just this week, there was a major wildfire that broke out in New Jersey, of all places. And then it caused mass disruption. I think there was a lot of roads closed. I didn't hear of any fatalities or injuries or anything, but definitely a lot of disruption, a lot of acreage burned in all places in New Jersey. I mean, the climate and what we're seeing now is a lot more drought conditions, hotter temperatures, and really like we talked about with Will is just the lack of forestry management and really doing things that AC just talked about around your home. A lot of people don't do those things,
Yeah.
especially if they live in the woods.
And what's that acronym? It's like UWI. It's like, is it Urban Wildland Interface? Am I saying that right? Is that what it is? Or Wildland Urban
Yeah,
Interface?
yeah. I always just call it wildland interface. Yeah, which essentially when wildland fires meet society, meet civilization, meet that city, meet that home, and that's when it really becomes because wildfire is a lot of people don't know, but a wildfire is a natural occurring thing. It's actually good for the forest. It's something that's been around before humans were doing it. Look at and that's how it kind of self-managed itself. It's how God made that work.
Yeah.
But when you put a bunch of houses in there and a bunch of society and civilization in the woods, and you got to find a way to limit that hazard, and it's become costly. It's become costly not just on a human side with deaths and injuries, but just on an economic side, it's very costly. I mean, look in California and LA, and just crazy fires and uncontrollable because the conditions, at some point you just can't control these things, and you kind of got to let it burn. And a lot of times, if you live in an area, I lived in Wyoming for a little while, and a lot of that stuff they kind of let it burn. They want it to burn as long as it's not impacting affecting humans because it's a good thing for the forest. It's managing itself. And if you can do it in a controlled environment, then you decrease. That's actually the best way to decrease the chances of an uncontrollable wildfire is having a controllable wildfire, if you will. Yeah, definitely a hazard that a lot of people are not thinking about, not talking about, but definitely needs to be.
They don't think about it in that wildland interface. The more we move out into the forest and cut those forests down and move out into that area, then we're creating more of those interfaces where the wildfire, the forest fire, turns into a neighborhood fire very, very quickly. And one thing that I don't know if you've talked about, and I'm sure you have, but the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, they have their FireWise guidelines, and those are amazing guidelines. You can go to just Google NFPA FireWise, and it will tell you like all the stuff to do to your home to not burn down. And it's some really simple, pragmatic stuff. I'm sure you know all about that, right, Blake? But this is easy stuff to do.
Yeah, very easy stuff to do that can really, just from a mitigation standpoint, these things are very simple, very cost effective. I mean, really, there's not a whole lot of cost involved unless you just absolutely have a terrible space around your house where it's just woods and trees and pine needles everywhere. But like you were saying, pine needles that get on the roof, and next thing you know, the wildfire starts, and that's just instant way to cause the house to go on fire. And if you could have a well, like you said, and have sprinklers around. When I worked in Wyoming, that was the big thing, was putting out sprinklers and putting it on top of the roof and hopefully wetting that roof down. And it really saved a lot of homes. So definitely, as wildfires are something we need to talk more about as preppers, as emergency managers, as society grows and moves into the woods. We got to remember that we got to be good stewards of the woods too, and not cause incidents like that to happen, and definitely a disaster that's very costly.
Right. And it's so easy to look at some of these things that they say in the FireWise guidelines, like simple stuff like having, bird blocking in the soffits of your home, right? Where these embers that are floating through the air on fire, if you've got a forest fire or a wildfire or a neighborhood fire, not that close to you, a mile away, you can have these burning embers that fly through. And if they, if you don't have small enough bird blocking where these things could just find their way into your attic or into your soffits or onto your asphalt shingles, that's going to be a very bad day for you. So just being a little more proactive and being able to mitigate stuff like that, like you were saying, that's kind of the big one for me, because I feel pretty good about most of my preparedness, but the wildfire thing really does keep me up at night. And if you want to go, one step crazier, a lot of people are doing rain barrels now. Just catch your rainwater and use it for the garden and things like that. But if you have a rain barrel and a very inexpensive pump, then if your water goes out or your generator goes out, you can fight a fire fairly effectively at your home just by harvesting the rainwater and having a cistern ready to go. So I recently bought a couple just to run off the gutter. I think I got 165 gallon big, cistern, and they weren't very expensive. It was maybe $150 or something. And you think about that, and you know this better than I do, but 150 gallons is fairly effective. If you've got it, if you have the right nozzle and the right pump, you can get quite a bit done with 150 gallons of water if it's not too outrageous, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that was about what you carry on a brush truck, and that really will put a knockdown on a fire if it's really getting to really stop it and get it to not increase. Yeah, perfect. So next, kind of moving into your background.
Mm-hmm.
As someone that's a subject matter expert in various topics there, what is something that you learned through that experience that kind of applies to being a prepper in today's society?
I think a lot of it goes into the sort of the critical infrastructure and just kind of how fragile a lot of our infrastructure is. If you allow me to go off on a tangent and talk about some federal stuff here, I'm happy to do it. But, like if we talk about like on a national scale, critical infrastructure attacks are probably the thing that I'm thinking from a national standpoint. That is kind of the big one. And that really comes from my experience watching the federal government interact with its state and local partners about how they're going to protect those state and local partners when something bad happens. And all the signs right now, my magic 8 ball kind of points to that critical infrastructure grid down, either power and or GPS. That's kind of the thing that I would say that my experience has led me to believe lately.
Yeah, critical infrastructure is definitely a target right now. And I know if you haven't listened to the show before, critical infrastructure is the water, the sewer, power, internet, fiber, really anything that keeps your house going, gas, those types of things. And then also looking at if you look at it by the federal government's standards, critical infrastructure is a lot bigger. Healthcare is actually critical infrastructure, education, transportation, roads, bridges, things of that nature. So, those are things that are very soft targets right now. A lot of those are very soft targets. Some of them have got better over the last couple years, but it's definitely a concern. I think that's if you ask question one to me, that's my keep me up at night is that threat to critical infrastructure because it is so weak, so low. High impact and low, just easy to affect. Knock on wood, I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. There was a couple years ago, or actually last year, right down the road from me in Southern Pines, North Carolina, Moore County. If you know where Pinehurst is, the big golf place, where a lot of people play golf. I don't play golf, but that's down there. But they had a critical infrastructure attack, and people shot into a transfer station, a power transfer station, and caused the power to go out for multiple weeks because of the transfer station they hit affected the whole county. It's still yet to know of who did it, why they did it, and if they even knew that what they hit, what they could do to it. But I mean, things like that are just so easy. We've talked before with Chris Robbins, the emergency expert here on the show, and he's also a fellow emergency manager. We dive and geek out into critical infrastructure because that is one thing as an emergency manager we try to focus on and look at and how we can protect those things from not only intentional targets but just failure of utility, failure of these different systems, maybe not by design, but it can happen. It's just by coincidence that it happens. So critical
Sure.
infrastructure is definitely a hot topic right now, and something again, something we don't talk about enough and a lot of people don't think about.
Right. And let me tell you, and this just does come from some of my experience of working within the federal government and watching the dollars flow. Yeah, it's funny because on our show, we don't really get like too conspiracy theory, but trust me, man, I like to sometimes. And for me personally, it's the GPS system and the power grid. And we do talk about this a little bit on our show, but I've worked in the big government mitigation space, and I do have to be careful with some non-disclosure agreements, security clearances, and things like that. But I can tell you that for years, the federal government was focusing on CBRN a lot of biologic response from the grant side of the equation. And a lot of this is very public. You can look at the Stone Garden grants, the PSPG, which is the Port Security Grant Program. You can look at the Secure the City programs. And so much of this was focused on chemical and biologic attacks. And then COVID showed up. Now, I'm not saying that they predicted it or they saw it coming. I'm just saying that they were preparing for it. And then something like that they were preparing for happened. And in years since COVID, you've seen those same program dollars. So PSPG programs, Stone Garden Grant, the Secure the City, you've seen those same program dollars shift to give preferential award treatment to cybersecurity and critical infrastructure protection. And there's some really good articles and even a book written by, there's a retired Air Force colonel I like to follow. Her name is Jennifer Hesterman. And she talks about the Metcalf power attack, which was exactly like you were talking about, where people showed up in the middle of the night, they took out a substation, and it like nearly took down all of Silicon Valley. And so we talk about how fragile the power system really is. And since then, it hasn't been reinforced. In fact, it's been more reliant on the internet since then. So along with that, we've got our GPS system, which again, it's super fragile technology from the 1970s. So I think the big one, the next big one, it really could be that kind of attack, and the government seems to be planning and trying to mitigate it. And two, it would be extremely detrimental to us. And a lot of people talk about the EMP, right? How devastating that would be. And I'm not discrediting that. But my position is that EMPs, they take a ton of energy, like a nuclear bomb type energy, and they would require the attack to happen on our homeland, on American soil. My argument against that is simply that an attack on our GPS system or critical infrastructure requires neither one of those things. It could be a foreign actor, and it could be a cyber attack, and it's very low energy, and it can happen offshore. So that's kind of when I talk about the big federal kind of, countrywide big thing, I really think about critical infrastructure and GPS. And I don't know if you've talked a lot about the GPS system, but it's not just navigation. It's not just airplanes flying safe, but man, our banking system is based on time we get from the GPS system. Like if GPS went down, credit card transactions are out. Like network time comes from GPS. So I don't think people realize that, but those two things, power grid, GPS, very old technology. They haven't really been hardened. They would be very easy to take down, and they would require so much less energy than like the EMP, but they would do almost the same thing.
That's definitely something I have not talked about a lot of, but definitely sparks the idea is that GPS aspect. We don't think about that's just something that kind of lingers in the background. We don't think about that type of stuff until something goes wrong with it. It's kind of like, in emergency management, there's a lot of different things, systems and stuff like that. We don't think about it. We just expect it to work until it goes wrong and someone goes to us and says, why isn't this working? And I said, well, I don't know. We need to talk about this and we need to harden this and figure out, have procedures and place and stuff like that. So, that's definitely a good topic to explore. And like you were kind of saying, in my view of how grants and how the federal government works and even states, it's very reactive. It's very, it's whatever the topic is of that time. And we kind of got, early 2000s, 80s, 90s was really that sea burn. There was a lot of different things going on in the world where people thought that, there could be chemical or biological attacks. And, now it's, COVID, now it's pandemic, and definitely I've seen a lot more on that critical infrastructure type of stuff. But the government throws money at it and hope and praise it works, and half the time it doesn't. And that's just kind of how the federal government works. So welcome to I can say those things as I don't work for the federal government, or
Sure.
I've never worked. I work for government, but that those types of things happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Definitely a good. We could talk critical infrastructure for days and days. And what I talk about a lot and I preach is that if you're prepared, if you have the water, the resources, the food, everything like that, you are ahead of the game if any type of critical infrastructure fails. If it's a water outage, if it's a sewer, or if it's a power, Wi-Fi or anything like that, and really just learn to think about those things. A lot of people just don't tabletop it or have a discussion with their family in their head about, what if the water goes out? How am I going to adapt to that situation? Having those conversations, having that thought even is, better than definitely anyone else in America, because most people just expect it to work. And then when it fails, they freak out, they go panic buy, and next thing you know, we're Walmart's out of water.
Right.
It's
We
definitely
have something we say a lot on our show is you just choose not to participate in the you already have the food and you already have the water, then you're not doing the panic buying. You're choosing not to participate in that SHTF event at Walmart. Just choose not to participate.
exactly. Yeah, if you have all these things in place, you don't need to worry. That's what I tell people too. And whenever we kicked off season 3 a few weeks ago, and I recorded the first episode, I talk about why we prepare so we don't have to worry. We don't have to live in fear because we're prepared.
Sure.
My wife is a worry or panic person. And then she married me, and I'm like everything could be failing. Oh, we're fine, we're good, we're good, we got it all.
Yep.
We're good. If I start worrying about something, then she knows it probably needs. She's learned we probably need to worry about it then. But that's we prepare so we don't have to worry, and it's definitely good to do. I kind of moving on to talking about resources and stuff like that. What is kind of your prep project for the next year? Things that you really want to work on as yourself as a prepper, if it's skills, if it's resources, things you want to build on or improve. What are those next things that looks like in 2025?
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to be extremely well prepared already. And you never want to say, well, I'm prepared for anything, because you never are. But yeah, I have taken on a lot of projects, from the massive garden fence that's elk proof now to catching wild bee swarms lately. So I kind of have the endless honey supply. There's a lot of really cool things I've done lately. But the next big one, honestly, Blake, is and maybe you can help out with this, is I really want to get some kind of mobile firefighting type trailer. There's like a multi-quip one I think I've seen, that's about a 525 gallon trailer, that's kind of the maximum weight that my truck could haul. And it's got like the Honda pump and the nozzle and the hose and all that kind of stuff kind of self-contained in it. And so something like that. And the reason for that is obviously, like I said, forest fires is that one thing that does keep me up at night, wildfires, but also having the mobile aspect to it. Because in my scenario, I don't want to fight a fire at my house. I want to fight a fire down the street at my neighbor's house. I don't want it to get to my house. So that's kind of where I'm going, is some kind of mobile, towable kind of fire rig. And the one I've seen, there's a pretty popular one out there that's, it's going to be a big hefty purchase, but it's like a 500 gallon tank with the Honda trash pump and the nozzle and a reel of hose and a manifold that you could connect like a couple garden hoses to. So that's kind of, I think, going to be my spring prepper project, is identifying that and identifying whether I can build kind of my own rig for less money or buying kind of an off the shelf type rig. But that's the kind of thing I'd like to do. And I think a lot of people don't think about that they think about their home as a bubble. Like I'm okay where I am right now, but I like to think a little bigger in that sense of community. Like, one, I don't want my neighbor's house to burn down. There's a bunch of reasons I don't want to burn down. Because one, maybe I'm going to have to help them out if their house burns down. Two, it's bad for my property value if my neighbor's house burns down. And two or three, I don't want to fight the fire here. I want to fight the fire somewhere else, so nothing happens here. So I'm that guy that when my neighbor says, "Hey, down the street a mile away, a fire broke out," I'm the guy that wants to take my resources and get my neighbors together and go down and fight that fire there, rather than waiting for someone to show up, take care of it, and hope it doesn't get to my place, and then have the ability to fight the fire when it gets here. So that's kind of my next big one, is sort of that mobile firefighting rig, so I can fight fires not just all around my property, but also around my neighbors' properties, so I never have to fight it at my property.
Very cool. Yeah, definitely a unique idea. Something that most people don't think about, but a lot of people expect the fire department to show up whenever 911's called. And unfortunately, if you live in a wildfire-prone area, that is probably one of your best resources, is having your own type of rig where you can put out the fire or put out the neighbor's fire, so that way it's not spreading. Because it take a little bit for the fire department to get there, especially during a disaster. If we're looking at something where it's a large wildfire that's broken out or something like that, and next thing the wildfire spread to your place, it's that's definitely a good home protection, and good to have in general. Definitely a lot of uses there, and definitely something I don't hear a whole lot about. You want to make your own mobile fire truck,
No, trust me,
that works pretty well.
I get kind of crazy. There's some crazy things I've done, and there's a lot of I do have some expendable income to do that. And I'm also very irresponsible, so I do like to get into some of the crazier prepper things. But also, if you've got 500 gallons of potable water,
Yep.
it's not just for fighting a fire. You've got I don't know if you've probably seen these sort of little wildland rigs that have a manifold that can hook up 3/4 inch like garden hose to it. This is something that in a grid down SHTF event, you could backfeed your home with this. You could run this into your RV. Let's say it's things are really bad and you've got 2 or 3 neighbors that show up with these are those city water hookups. You could get a lot done with 500 gallons worth of water besides just fight a fire. A lot of people could live for a long time. They say about a gallon per day per person, and that's for everything. That's bathing and cooking and all that kind of stuff. Minimum, you need a quart a day just to drink. So you think about that, doing the math out there. That's like a long time of water if you've got to help out the community.
A lot of good purposes there, and definitely a prepper project that's needed. And if you have the resources and ability to do it, I would definitely do it. That definitely sounds cool. Definitely send us some pictures on that one.
I will.
With that, I will. I definitely would like to see that one. So
I'll keep you updated.
Perfect. Perfect. So let's kind of talk about. We kind of talked about some of these scenarios. We talked about
Mm-hmm.
but we'll just kind of free discussion it, whatever. We got about 30 more minutes left here.
Sure.
But the first one we talked about, we've already kind of hinted at, is that power grid failure. What does that look like? Why, we talked about already why this could happen, how easy this is to happen, whether it's intentional or, it's unintentional. It's just a failure. Power goes out, unfortunately, around the US probably every second. I would like to see the statistic on that. But, it seems like in our community, there's someone that, a neighborhood or a little section that loses power at least once a week. So it's just a matter of time before it's you. And, a lot of people don't think about, and a lot of people, they can talk, or they can survive, even if they're not a prepper, they have nothing, they can survive an hour or two, something like that. But really, talking about a day, 2 days, I mean, a week, a month. What, AC, does that look like to you? What are some good resources that people could have to survive this, that aren't too out of the too crazy to buy, or things like that, to really survive this type of situation?
Yeah, good question. So, like I said, I am a crazy person and I've got like the battery home backup and solar and all this kind of stuff. But, planning for a power failure, I would say you have to have, well, if you need backup power, most people need electricity, have that backup power plan and practice it. And here's the thing that's the issue is, and you're okay with me getting a little nerdy and talking about solar and battery stuff for a minute, dude. So here's the thing is, you can go on Amazon, and a lot of people do this, where they go buy that solar generator, just a solar battery backup thing. Jackery is one. There's a couple of these brands out there, but let's just take the scenario. Sizing the solar battery system correctly is the biggest thing. So a modern refrigerator takes about 100 watts of power, and that's not a lot of power if you think about it. Dude, when we were kids, that was how much power the light bulb inside the refrigerator took, right? So they don't take a lot of power anymore, the power consumption technology, just the efficiency has come so far. So there's these new solar generators. I don't really like that term because it's just a battery with a solar panel. It's not really a solar generator, but I get it. That's a marketing term. But making sure that you size them appropriately is key. So I just did this just for the purpose of this show for you. I picked kind of the most popular one on Amazon, about $700 or $800. This Jackery 1000. It's a 1000 watt hour battery with an AC outlet, like a plug, not just 12 volt. And it's got a 200 watt fold out solar panel. So this is that system. I see a lot of people buying these and saying, hey, for a power outage situation, I am all set. I've got this thing. It cost me $700 or $800. It was a lot of money, and now I'm good to go. But let's do the math on that. And this is the issue, because people they never practice these preps. They just buy it. They put it in the closet. They make sure it's charged, and they go, hey, when the power goes out, man, I'm all set. And here's why you're not. And let's talk about that. That 1000 watt hour system. And like I said, you can look these up on Amazon. This was like this was the one that, when you Google solar generator, this is the one Amazon goes, we recommend this one. This is the one all your friends bought. So under ideal conditions, it's 1000 watt hours, 1070 to be exact. That would run a 100 watt refrigerator or freezer or whatever you have for 10 hours, right? So that's how that works, a watt hour. So 1000 watt hours, that would run a 100 watt widget for 10 hours. That's the math, if that makes sense to everybody. And that was very good round math. Now, it has a 200 watt fold out solar panel. And this is a pretty good size solar panel. What that means is that thing can charge your battery under ideal conditions. So not taking into account conversion loss, thinking that you can see the sun for all those 5 hours, it can charge that battery in 5 hours. But that's if you're not using that system. So for this scenario, let's say it's a time of the year where you've got 12 hours of unobstructed daylight and 12 hours of darkness, right? Let's say it's, kind of spring, fall, equinox thing, just for fairsies. So what that means is in those 12 hours, that 200 watt panel, we're doing some very simple math here, provides about 2400 watt hours to that battery. Again, that is under ideal conditions, like ideal, optimal laboratory conditions, that you're producing about these 2400 watt hours. That's enough to run your refrigerator and charge your battery from zero. And then you'll have, let's say, in those 12 hours, you have another 400 watt hours to play with. That's kind of enough to charge your cell phones. Now remember, the battery only has enough to run your fridge for 10 hours. So for the 12 hours of darkness, even if all you did was run the refrigerator, that battery's dead. And I think people have it in their mind that they're like, I went and bought this $800 solar generator. I'm going to be able to watch TV and run my microwave and do everything I want. And it's just not the case. Obviously, there's things you can do to mitigate this. You don't have to run your fridge and freezer like all the time. You can not open the door a lot. You can leave it unplugged or you can leave it off. But what I'm getting at is have a plan on how you're going to live without the grid, without going down to the FEMA camp as soon as the power goes out. You know what I mean? Like that's where I'm going. So I just did very simple math. And I think people don't do that. I think people go, I'm going to go buy a solar generator. And now I'm all set for when the power outage happens. And I just did the math for you that even in ideal optimal conditions, that solar generator is not going to do what you think it's going to do. It is going to provide you some supplemental electricity. But like I'm the kind of guy, I've got a deep freezer in my garage full of meat, and I've got a refrigerator in the house, and just that alone with one of those off-the-shelf solar generators, all my food will go bad. If I lost grid and I bought one of these solar generators and I thought I was going to be okay. So that's kind of the advice that I would give in that situation is having a backup plan and then practicing that backup plan. And I'm not saying that, okay, it's not worth buying that $800 solar generator. You got to go spend thousands of dollars. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that have the plan on how to deal with that. Maybe the plan is you've got that little mini fridge in your office and you can cram all the really important stuff in there. And now that fridge is only a 50-watt fridge. Well, now we just bought you all that time back. Or maybe it's you've got a cooler and you're dumping ice in it and you're just making ice. And maybe that's the way to get through with not having your food spoil. But just thinking that way, if that makes sense, Blake, is that having those plans and then actually practicing those plans and saying, okay, let's take a long weekend, kids. Do this with the family. And this is a fun scenario to do is let's pretend the power's out for the weekend. So haul out that solar generator you bought and, have your little cell phone USB rechargers and that kind of thing and see what happens. See what happens at your home if you just go to your main breaker panel and you throw that thing off and see if you have what you need to survive. If you're someone who has like a camper or an RV, well, now that's actually a really good lifeboat during any kind of SHTF. Maybe you've got a gas generator and you've got however many hours you keep on hand of gas, but you can supplement your, solar generator, your solar charging system, or your RV camper system. So just the practicing aspect. When we talk about grid down scenarios, I think that's the one thing that I would encourage is people generally, and preppers are hoarders, I get it, we are, but people generally go buy the thing, they put it in their closet, and they go, when something happens, then I'll pull this out and we'll be good. And unfortunately, it's actually not the case a lot.
Definitely. Kind of going back to what you were talking about there is, a lot of people buy stuff, put it in the closet and forget about it. As preppers, I think one thing I enjoy as a prepper is going back and, having, either doing it monthly or weekly or annually, depending on what I'm checking, is doing, an inventory of what you have and don't have, making a list of things that need to be, replenished. If it's food and water, rotating your preps is definitely good. And these are basic principles that we've talked about here in the show before, but I definitely would help and alleviate any issues if you faced this power grid failure. And if you do these types of things, I think a lot of people could survive a little bit longer. So if we're getting into a few weeks or something of that nature, it's definitely going to be a different scenario.
Yeah.
But if you could have, I always say, so I live in an apartment right now. I can't have a generator, so I have a lot of what AC was talking about. I have several of those Jackery type. I don't have a Jackery because they are very, very expensive for what they are. So I have some off brands. It is. And I have some of the off brands of them. I have some other types of things that I can use to charge and charge devices and stuff like that. But as soon as I move to a house, there'll be a generator in the garage. So a generator is definitely good, especially like AC was talking about, if you have a deep freezer and 2 or 3 refrigerators and all of that. You don't want to lose all that food, if it's a short amount of time, let alone if it's a long amount of time. So having a generator is definitely good. Having some fuel on hand is definitely is important as well. Kind of the next one, I think we're just going to kind of combine these, is talking about active threats in your community, whether this is an active assailant that's occurring in some sort of event center, God help us, school or something like that, or a suspicious package bomb type of threat, type of thing like that. Just the other week, AC and I were talking, or just the other day, we had a suspicious package near Fort Bragg. Still no word on what that was. Probably will never know. But types of stuff like this happen. And a lot of people, they freak out when something happens like this because it doesn't happen that often. Suspicious packages and bomb threats and stuff, we probably see a little bit more, especially with a lot of people doing the swatting calls. And that's just where they call into a 911 center, say, hey, I put a bomb at this place, or I'm about to do this at
Sure.
this place. And next thing you know, you've rolled out your whole emergency operations plan for that school or that facility or whatever. It's caused mass chaos. And that's what they want, is to cause mass chaos. We actually, I've seen that several times in my career, these swatting calls already. So I think, a lot of this type of threat is just having that situational awareness, having that knowledge, and that not being able to freak out because you are prepared. You have these conversations with your family. Maybe you have a meeting spot in your community that you can meet at, or know that when something like this happens, meet at this spot or meet at our home, so that way we can kind of figure out what's going on. But AC, do you have any thing on that type of stuff?
Yeah, so a couple of things I would say. As far as something happening in the community, whether it's like the assailant, or maybe it's a terrorist attack or something like that. Like we've said before, don't participate. And what I mean by that is, don't have the need to do the panic buying. I remember seeing something during Superstorm Sandy, that's really hard to say, that people died at the gas station because, not from the storm, because there was only so much gas and there were shootouts at the gas station. So you know how you don't get shot at the gas station? You don't go to the gas station. Choosing not to participate, having enough equipment and supplies in your home to not have to participate is huge. The other thing I would say about the suspicious package and stuff, and we're going back to the CBRN, and I know we haven't defined that here, but I think your audience probably knows because you've defined this a lot. But so we don't know what's in the suspicious package, right? If it's explosive, it is what it is. Let the authorities do their job. If it's the other ones, if it's the chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, there's some things you can do to mitigate this. The one thing is, which way's the wind blowing? This is simple, right? Is it blowing towards you from that suspicious package or not? Because if it's not, the nature is taking care of a whole lot of the issues you might have. A couple of things that you could have in stock to mitigate those other letters within CBRN: having a JACE case or contingency medical, right? Having some antibiotics on hand is a big one to be able to treat any kind of biologics that you may bump into. Potassium iodide pills, right? You can buy those in case there's any kind of nuclear type issue. And again, knowing how to use them, because you can just as easily poison yourself with potassium iodide. So knowing when to use them. And then if you want to get a little more Gucci on this stuff, Radicode makes a really cool Bluetooth to your phone gamma spectrometer. So meaning that it's a Geiger counter that Bluetooths to your phone. And that's kind of cool because you could put that outside and then Bluetooth it to your phone and have a very good early warning of when something would happen. And then lastly, the simple stuff. Having the ability to seal up your home, close your vents, those kinds of things. A lot of these radiological and nuclear agents, they have a very quick half-life. So having the ability to, like I said, not participate, having the ability to stay inside your home without exchanging outside air for 48 to 72 hours. I know it sounds crazy, but that really could be life and death. So it's simple things. Having the roll of duct tape to seal up your home and having a place inside for your dog to pee. It's very simple, pragmatic things that people maybe just don't think about. But in the event, if you have those things, you're just going to be so much better off than people that haven't prepared for this. So those kinds of things, knowing, having the ability to deal with those, whether it's the chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear event in your community, it really could be the difference between life and death. And it's not crazy expensive stuff. We're not talking about like biohazard containment stuff. We're just talking about, having the ability to like seal your home up with duct tape and having enough food and water in there to not have to go out for it.
Yeah, and if you listen to the other episode that we just posted, that kind of kicked off season 3, we talk about seabird, we talk about gas masks and stuff like that with a
Yep. Gas mask, great one.
Yeah, these types of stuff is not rocket science.
Nope.
A lot of people I know, as an emergency manager, you have these things in the plan. You hope they never use them, but you put it out to the public whenever there is a hazmat situation. There is most people don't deal, but a lot of the seabird and hazardous materials can apply to these terrorist attacks, to these bomb threats, suspicious packages as well. And you put out this information, and a lot of people don't have these types of things. They don't have duct tape. They don't have, paper or the plastic sheeting that could go around the door frame or the window frame seal to seal this off. They don't have, just basic stuff. Cutting off your AC, your HVAC unit is huge. You don't want anything coming in during those times, basic, just common knowledge, things that AC and I might seem like common knowledge is not common knowledge around everyone else.
Right. Have some Visqueen and a place for your dog to pee.
Yeah, I mean, things like this are not rocket science. I feel like most of prepping is not rocket science. And when I go talk to people or tell people what I do, and I tell them I'm an emergency manager, and then I'll tell them I'm a prepper, and it kind of makes sense. And then they look at you like you're a rocket scientist about some of the stuff you're coming up with. I'm like, this is not that complicated, but it is to a lot of people, unfortunately, in today's society. And we have to. This is why we're focusing this on season 3. Is this these threats, these that are happening, that could happen. I feel like we are unfortunately, due to current political climates and geopolitical climates, these types of things could become a little bit more susceptible to happen, and we have to prepare for them and have some just situational awareness of what's going on. Like when I talked to my first episode, a lot of people just think they live underneath a rock and they don't even know what's going on in their community. And, something like this happens and like, they start freaking out. So perfect. This has been a great conversation, AC. I am so glad that we were finally able to get you on. We were going to at some point do a show too, where I'm on the Stakeholder Prepper Podcast, and get to do that. So I hope everyone, continues to follow us and definitely go check out AC. Where can you guys, our followers, find you guys on social media and everywhere else?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that, Blake. So Stakeholder Prepping is the podcast. Look it up. We're on all the major podcasty hosting services. So we have a website, stakeholderprepping.com, where we maintain a blog that's just basically every time we have an episode, because we do focus on a lot of this actionable intel, where if we did an episode like this, we'd have, here's the link to that Jackery system, and here's the link to that, Radicode spectrometer stuff. So anything we talk about on the podcast, we have it at stakeholderprepping.com. So you can check it out. Just Google Stakeholder Prepping Podcast, and you'll see that on on Spotify, stakeholderprepping.com, or you can shoot us an email. Chris and I both check that regularly. It's just pretty easy. stakeholderprepping@gmail.com. And Blake, I think it'd be really cool if we did like a 3-way show sometime and we could air it on both podcasts. That would be really fun, just to kind of bring you into the fold, because you definitely have a lot of experience and expertise in things that Chris and I don't have a lot of experience in. So I think it would be great to throw something together and get us all on and do kind of a mashup episode. That'd be really fun.
Absolutely, we will definitely be trying to do that here in season 3. I think that would be a lot of fun. One of my goals for either season 3 or season 4 is kind of to do a panel discussion podcast where we get some of the people that I've had on over the last year. I've brought in some great subject matter experts and really just kind of talk through some of that stuff. The tech and how that's all going to work is going to be the hard part, but
that'd be really
something
cool.
We'll try to look at here in maybe midsummer, something around there. But AC, so glad to have you on. Everyone, make sure to go check out the Stakeholder Podcast. Prepper Podcast, we are going to tag them and everything as well when this show airs. I hope everyone continues to stay aware, stay prepared, and stay alive out there. The All Hazards Prepper out.
Thank you for tuning in to the All Hazards Prepper Show. The All Hazards Prepper platform is part of the All Hazards Emergency Management Group, LLC, committed to assisting individuals, families, small businesses, and event or entertainment venues in prepping for various hazards. Be sure to follow the All Hazards Prepper on Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube. Always remember to stay aware, stay prepared, and stay alive.